Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, author and creator of Naked Communication, and I'm so psyched you're here. This show is all about taking charge of your life in new and inspired ways to create a life you deeply love. It's about being more you in all areas of your life, more courageous, more free, more alive, more naked. I'll be sharing stories and advice from amazing people around the world who are up to incredible things on how they are successfully breaking free from fear and old patterns in order to create incredible relationships and impactful lives so that you can do the same. This is the place to be inspired to live a courageous and naked life. Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs. So you can find the show notes to this episode, which have resources mentioned and a brief synopsis of the show over at sagebhobbs.com. Before I introduce you to today's guest, I want to make sure I share a couple of things with you. This is the tail end of season 2 of the show. So there will be a pause while I record and brainstorm and create season 3. So make sure you're signed up to get the notification when season 3 is live. If you love listening to the show, you can do that at wherever you listen. You can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or over on my website even. And over on the website, you'll also find information about how to work with me one-on-one. I am taking on a few new clients in the new year as I explore some other projects. So if you've been wondering about my individual coaching, you can find a way to connect with me over on my site just by setting up a call. We can just have a conversation. Or you can also find out about my book, which is called Naked Communication. That's on Amazon or on my website. That is like before there was the show as my passion project, there was the book, which is just a way to share with the world how we can have connection be at the forefront of our goals for every conversation we have. I'm just more and more aware, the more I read the news, the more I interview women for the show, of the need and necessity and power and healing of human connection. So the book, Naked Communication, helps us do that better in every area of our life, from our intimate relationships to our everyday interactions at the grocery store or wherever you go to work. So I would highly encourage you to check it out. It's an easy read that will give you a better toolbox for how you can really connect more effectively with people in your life every day. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to today's guest. It was such a privilege to have this conversation with Zoe LePage. She is the founder of and the executive director of Exhale to Inhale. She found personal strength and comfort in yoga before completing her yoga teacher training several years back. And as a senior at Barnard College in 2013, Zoe founded Exhale to Inhale, which I just was so inspired by her going for something so beautiful at an early stage and season of life, and really what it has taken for her to lead and to learn what leadership looks like and to choose leadership. So she created the vision for the organization and ensured the correct individuals and systems were in place to make her vision become a reality. She spent years as a consultant at a boutique consulting firm in New York City before gratefully returning full-time to Exhale to Inhale and to lead the organization to its next iteration. She's committed to curiosity, to choosing joy and gratitude, and she's thankful to all of her teachers, both on and off the mat. So you will learn more about what Exhale to Inhale is all about. In short, it is a beautiful yoga organization that takes yoga to folks who would not typically have access to it, with an emphasis on survivors of domestic and sexual violence. So we talk about privilege on the show and what it really meant for her, again, to take this gift that she had been granted through yoga and make it more accessible to others. We talk about the secrecy of domestic violence and really uncovering, peeling back the layers of shame. We talk about metoo and Time's Up and really finally bringing light to an epidemic. We talk about how it can be an asset to not really know what you're doing all of the time, and how that informed her leadership as somebody who was a young leader in many ways, how she really showed up courageously, and how she continues to bring a spirit of curiosity to growing her organization, and the impact that her organization has made inside of domestic violence shelters and other access points where healing can be such an incredible opportunity to use yoga as a source of healing. So there's so much more that we covered. This idea of intention versus impact and resilience, and yoga as a force for good versus just an internal practice. So Zoe LePage, such a privilege to have her on the show. I know that everyone can learn from the courage it has taken for her to really step out and create something in the world and follow her heart. So happy listening. I can't wait to hear what you think about it. Hi, Zoe. I'm so psyched you're here. Thanks so much for being on Naked Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Okay, so I have so many questions for you today. I'm just really excited for the world to hear more about the work you are doing and what it took for you to create it. But I always start with a question that I feel like is at the core of how we really live powerful, self-expressed, impactful lives, which is, what does courage mean to you?
Courage means showing up when you're not 100% certain, when you don't quite have the answer, right? Showing up anyway in that place.
That's great. I feel like that's perfectly timed advice for me. Thank you. I woke up this morning, like having been haunted by some things I've been reading in the news. And I really woke up early at like 5:20 when everybody in my house was still asleep, and I just couldn't get back to sleep. And there is sometimes this feeling of, how do you keep showing up when you don't have all the answers and you know that there's something to be done? Like, you know that there's work to be done, ways that you need to support and contribute. And you're not sure exactly what the through line is, but you know that something has to happen. So I just really appreciate that. Showing up anyway it's a great.
And anything I always say, it's always for me too. Like very literally, oh, okay, what does courage look like for me today? Okay, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to show up anyway. Great, courage.
Great, exactly. Hey, easy, done. We're so perfect. Okay, so most people who are listening are probably new to you and your work. And you and I were talking before we hit record just about this deep desire that I feel people have, my clients, women I talk to, friends, for hope, that we keep opening up our news feeds or wherever we gather information about the world. And for the people that are in my circle, and definitely listeners of this show, there's a desire to have a positive impact in the world, to feel like our lives have meaning, that we are connected, that there's a shared humanity. And sometimes there is a sense of deflation when we get inundated with things that seem hard. So I really am excited. We've been trying to get this interview together for a while, and I'm so excited for people to hear what you're up to. So let's just start there. Why don't you tell us a bit about your work and how and why you came to do it? Particularly, obviously, exhale to inhale and what that means to you.
It's been a busy couple of months for me, so I appreciate your patience in getting this scheduled, but really excited to be here. So I am the founder of Exhale to Inhale, which is a nonprofit organization that brings trauma-informed yoga to both survivors of domestic violence and sexual assaults and the staff members who work with them. And I started the organization a little over 5 years ago now, when I was a senior at Barnard College here in New York. It started as a school project.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I was part of a women's leadership program through my 4 years of school that taught us the history of women's leadership skills. And then senior year invited us to change the world. And I often say there's something to be said about being, 20 something and just kind of fearless and just like change the world. Okay, let me start on today.
I think there's a certain amount of naivete that is incredibly powerful and useful.
Yeah. And I think also Barnard fostered that too. Going to a women's college that really instilled in me, in us, that I have a voice, I have a seat at the table, and I can, and I do. Actually, we all have an impact, right? It's how I choose to impact, I think, is what matters there. But
wait, you can't skip over that, actually. Hold on, because that was really wise. So we all have an impact, and then how we choose to impact. That's like a pretty awakened thing to say. So just speak a little bit more to that, because I actually think a lot of people who come to find this show and various ways that people learn, it's because they're wondering, like, but do I? You know, like
in this like Instagram filled world that we live in, which I do participate in, obviously, but you know, this term of influencer. Well, everyone is an influencer, right? Like you influence the people in your life, like whether you have 100,000 followers or 2 followers, like you're influencing people. No, we all have an impact, right? And it's like, I don't know, I was having a conversation with my mom the other day, talking back to like middle school, right? When like people were being bullied and someone's being bullied and you sit there silently, like you're having an impact by not saying something, right?
Yeah, right.
And I think that is actually empowering to realize that, you know, as you live your life, you're impacting, you know, the people in your life, you know, most concretely, but the world. And that's without question. And then it's like, how do you want to impact, right? Do you want to positively impact, negatively impact? Do you want to use your voice? Do you not want to use your voice? It's funny, the program that I was part of during college, this leadership development program, one of its principles was it wasn't something you had to apply to, right? It was like one of the philosophies was you opt into being a leader, which I think is really beautiful. Like you just opt in.
It's very unusual.
Yeah, very unusual.
It's very unusual versus earning it, proving, striving.
Popularity. Yeah, that idea of like opting into being a leader. And I think, you know, that's actually something that is not one, you know, there's obviously moments where choices like that matter more, right? There are certain turning points in our lives, but I really live my life, you know, like one day at a time. And so like daily, it's the choice of like, how do you want to impact? Do you want to lead today?
Right. Great. Okay. So you were 21 years old, 21 years old, and you had opted into being a leader, and Barnard created this beautiful container.
Yeah. And I think I was probably 23. So I'm old for my grade and life stage. I moved from Canada. So like my school timing was a little different. And then before, this is a relevant part of the story, before I went to college, I actually took a gap year between high school and college to kind of, I was having my first of many quarter life crises.
Yeah.
I think I'm like on crisis 3 now.
There's many more coming. As a 41-year-old, if you're a seeker and you want to make a big impact, you're going to have more questioning stages.
And I've actually I've started to like embrace them a little more than be totally thrown by them. But so I took a gap year between high school and college. I had grown up as a ballet dancer, and that kind of took me down a bit of a dark rabbit hole. And so quit dancing my senior year of high school, and then kind of spiraled out because who was I if I was no longer, you know, dancing? And so I said, I need to take time off. And my parents wisely said, you can take a year off, but you must like apply to and get into school and then go do whatever you want for a year. So by the time I graduated, I think I was around 23.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's, you know, definitely been a journey. As someone said to me once, like I've lived many lives, which is, you know, amazing. Yeah. And so, then I opted into being a leader and knew I wanted to do something with yoga. So part of what I did during that gap year was I took my yoga teacher training here at YogaWorks in New York City with no intention to teach or really anything. Like there was no concrete goal at the end. As you said, I'm kind of a seeker. And when I was, you know, at the end of high school is when I found yoga, and I was, you know, not in a great place. And I found some solace in yoga and was like, what is this? Why do I walk into yoga feeling shitty and I walk out feeling better?
I've had very similar experience with yoga. I started also when I was 23.
Yeah, what's the wizardry here, right? I need to know. And so part of what I did that year was do my yoga teacher training.
And in the gap year?
In the gap year.
Cool.
Yeah. So I was, you know, 17 or 18.
Yeah, young, very young.
Yeah, very young with a whole bunch of like 41-year-olds, which was amazing because they kind of took me under their wing.
Which is the age I am now. So that's such a funny thought. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? How would I?
I turned 29 on Thursday and I'm like, how does this happening? Like, what?
I know. Every year.
Life, man.
So how did you come to land on this particular area of work?
Yeah. So as I was saying, so I knew I wanted to do something with yoga and, you know, knew I just wanted to, I guess, spread the gospel of yoga, and was very aware that I was I was and am very privileged that I have access to yoga, right? And so I wanted to bring yoga to people who might not have access to it. And so then I spent, a couple days trying to think of, okay, like, who do I feel called towards bringing yoga to? And I have a family member, actually my mom is a survivor of domestic violence. And it's nothing that I lived through in the sense of, it was not my father. It happened before I was born, but it was definitely something that I was aware of growing up.
Yeah.
That this is an experience. And honestly, it wasn't one we talked about that much growing up. And I think in some ways that made it bigger for me, but just knew vaguely that my mom had been in this situation and it was not, I don't know what language you use to talk to like a 10-year-old about that issue, but like I knew it happened and I knew it wasn't good. And I found that like, obviously it wasn't like a daily thing I would think about, but on some like fundamental level, that kind of shook me that my mom had been through this. And, so that had been kind of a part of my awareness.
There's a personal connection to that particular thing. You were in a curiosity.
Yeah. And then I get to college and several friends who, disclosed to me that they're survivors of sexual assault.
Yeah.
Some before college, some while they were at college. And so for me, what, Me Too, Time's Up has brought up for many of us now, like I was kind of already living there in terms of like, this is not happening to those women out there, whatever that means.
Whatever that means, right.
This is happening in our homes, in our backyard.
All the time.
All the time. And I think
regardless of socioeconomic status, it's a cross section of women who suffer from that.
So yes, that. And I think the other thing that many people, and I don't mean to sound like, oh, I'm the enlightened one and I know, and most people don't. Like, I think many of us, right, like when Me Too, Time's Up is coming up, we're like, obviously, like, where have you all been? This is an epidemic, but it wasn't on this like full level of awareness. I think the piece though that many people still don't realize is it's not like this is a discrete episode or instance that happens and then like someone goes to therapy once and then like, okay,
they're healed. Right. Right. Of course. Right.
It's decades. It's lifetime,
Yeah. I actually don't know if you know about me. And most people who listen about me know that I have a master's in counseling psychology and I spent 10 years working with teens in schools primarily. And I worked with several teens who were victims of violence and sexual assault. Yeah. And a few of them have continued to be in my life and are now in their 20s. And when I heard about your work, which I heard about through our dear mutual friend, Erica, I was like, oh my gosh, we need this everywhere, because how I could support them through like conventional talk therapy. And I brought in mindfulness and I brought in some body awareness and any tool that I had. But it was like the tip of the iceberg, A, because we were in school. So I couldn't go that deep, I needed to get them back to class.
Yeah.
But B, because they were still learning their bodies. I mean, they were 13, 14 years old, right? And like what was ahead of them in terms of intimacy and sexual exploration. And, it was all going to resurface again and again. And when I saw, oh my gosh, doing like body or somatic work specifically for this kind of trauma, I was really excited for this to exist in the world.
I'm so excited for this to exist in the world.
Yeah. So walk us through how this came to be, how Exhale to Inhale came to be. It started with a germination of an idea and a call to leadership at Barnard.
Yeah.
And then, personal relationship with your mom and her story.
Yep. And then, not that it was easy. It definitely wasn't easy, but, it came together very simply in a sense of like, okay, this has been my experience of yoga, which for me, from day one, yoga helped me feel strong and safe in my body. Those are like the words that are just like, yep, that's exactly what it is for yoga, strong and safe in my body. And so I saw or, experienced, my loved one's experience of trauma and the after effects of trauma, years, decades later. And it was just this intuitive sense of, okay, I think yoga may be a powerful experience for individuals like this, who have experienced this type of. And then I just started a spreadsheet.
You just started a spreadsheet. See, this is what I want people to hear. I actually want to just interject for a moment because we sometimes just feel so overwhelmed or daunted. That's what I was talking about earlier with the naivete. It wasn't an insult. It was, I think I was a bit naive when I started my own business. And if I hadn't been, I'm not sure I would have jumped full in, Yeah. And so just that we get overwhelmed by the idea of feeling too big or scary, or we don't know enough, and so when you just can start a spreadsheet based on a hunch of things, something you love, helping people you love, it can be like a pretty small action that starts a big movement, and anyone can do that. I guess that's what I just want to drill down for a moment to anyone who's listening, who's like, I've had this thought, that sometimes it can be as simple as the beginning, at least, and then it gets more complicated as you roll things out. But you started a spreadsheet.
I started, and it's interesting you say that because I think maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, I was applying for this grant that really asked some very thoughtful questions. And as I was filling it out, I was having a bit of regret. I was like, why didn't I really think about all of these things in 2013 when I was starting this organization? Things would have been so much better if I had thought through all of these answers, before starting. And then I realized I would have gone into analysis paralysis.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Right.
I wouldn't have started, and I think it's not okay, be careless and quit your job and, all those things. But I think there is something to be said for just start, right? And you can pivot and flex as you move through it. But I think there are far too many people that just have, an idea or a dream, and they let their fear or their who am I to? I think that's a big one for a lot of us of who am I to do this? Get in the way, not only of themselves, but the impact they can have.
Absolutely. Who am I to do this is, I think, the exact undercurrent that holds particularly a lot of women back.
Yes.
And not to overly gender stereotype or generalize, but that is, there's some research around that. Just what we think we have to have accomplished or studied or accolades or collected degrees, in order to sort of throw our hat in the ring. It really stops us from just exploring the germination of an idea.
For sure. No, the who am I to or impostor syndrome. That's definitely one that I struggle with. I currently struggle with, right? Just to be 100% transparent.
Thank you.
All the time. And it is something that, during college, I was teaching yoga on campus, and I did that for about a year and a half. And then who am I to be a yoga teacher, right? Everyone and their aunt is a yoga teacher, and I am not.
In New York.
What do I have to say? And so that took me out. I didn't teach yoga for years because of that. And
because you let it really infiltrated.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's also the path is complicated because I think then it was a bit of a blessing because then I channeled that energy that maybe I would have been teaching. I channeled that into creating Exhale to Inhale, which, so it all works out. But I'm just saying that that who am I to is something that I struggle with. And, maybe it's women and I'm sure that it is more, but I also think it's temperament and confidence. It's all the things.
It's all of the things. Yeah. And I'm thinking I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes, but there's another episode. I'll actually send it to you with this amazing woman, Allison Maehlman, who, when she was in college, her older brother committed suicide. He was a senior. Actually, I want to say he was at Columbia, which is the, Barnard Brothers School, right? And she, I believe, was just a freshman. And by the time she graduated, she had decided she was going to start a nonprofit that, brought mental illness out of the shadows and helped people figure out how to get support before it was too late. Yeah. And it's called Active Minds. It's been around for 15 or more years, has over 500 chapters on college and high school campuses around the country.
Wow.
And she was on the show, and she moved out here from DC actually. So we met up here in Boulder, but just thinking of you and her and this courage to act, even when you're not really sure on the action. She's like, I had no background in nonprofit management and management at all. She's like, I was just out of college with a knowing that this needed to exist.
Yeah.
And basically just the courage to take the first few steps.
Yeah.
And then the persistence to stay with it.
And it's, again, and then I'll get back to more of like the process and the timeline, but like, I do think that, it sounds very similar to me in that not knowingness, which, right, we said, or I defined, that's courage. I think that actually also can be, or I've found it to be an asset, because I think a downfall of many people, particularly people in a leadership position, is them thinking like, I know all the things, right? And I know the way to do it, versus, again, starting a nonprofit at 23, having no nonprofit management experience, it forced me to, or invited me to, pull in people around me and say, I don't know, what do you think? And kind of build up a brain trust of people. And that, who is in that brain trust has kind of shape-shifted over the years as people have come and gone and the needs of the organization has been different. But, it's starting it that way kind of has fostered the culture of Exhale to Inhale in terms of like, this is not my baby. Like, I'm the founder. I set the wheels in motion, but it's so much bigger than me. And thinks it's so much bigger than me because, I am just one person.
Right. You can make more impact in collaboration, in collective, in community. The impact for this work can be so much more.
Yeah. So I started with a spreadsheet and Google, right? Like just kind of looking up, domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers here in New York. And started cold reaching out to people and
just reaching out to these organizations that were serving
shelters, rape crisis centers.
What'd you say when you reached out?
Man, I wish I could find some of those emails. What could I have said? Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a college senior. I want to bring yoga to your residence. Will you meet with me?
That is so brave. I love it.
People said yes.
Yeah. People said yes.
People said yes. And I think again, not to undercut what I was doing, but so I guess I'll pause for a second, but so I was reaching out to shelters on one end. And then on the other end, I did have a bit of a network here in New York because I'd done my training here in New York and I was just kind of tapped into the New York yoga scene. So at the same time, I was setting up interviews. I was a very serious college senior. So I was setting up interviews with teachers, yoga teachers to volunteer teach for us. And that I can't remember what the questions were, but I had a full sheet of questions for these, grown up yoga teachers who wanted to volunteer. And I can still see it as clear as day. I met them at this coffee shop on 72nd Street on the Upper West Side and conducted interviews. It was very official, the whole thing.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yep.
And, many of those teachers are still with us. They're still part of the family. And
they felt the cause. They felt it.
What stood out to me in those conversations on the yoga teacher side of things was everyone said, yes, I want to be involved. I want to give back. I've wanted to do something like this. I just didn't know how or where or when. I just needed someone to facilitate this for me. And even more than that, some of the teachers, it was specifically an experience of domestic violence or sexual assault. For many of them, it was just life, right? A tough thing had happened in their life and yoga had helped them, had saved them. And they were I just want to pay it forward. And then on the shelter side of things, everyone said, yes, we see how this would help our residents. We just are busy trying to keep the lights on, right? We don't have time to try to put together a yoga program. And so again, it was much more than this, but it did really feel like I was that person standing in the middle being hey, you want to offer yoga? Hey, you need yoga?
It was just a perfect match and you were able to bring it together.
Yeah. And right. It's much more complicated than that. And, many, many late nights of trying to make all the things work and trying this and then trying that. But baseline, there was a need and there was a desire to give. And I just brought that together.
So what does Exhale to Inhale really do for people now? What's the structure of what it offers today? I'm just curious from where it came to where it is.
Oh, well, it's come very far. Because again, when I started, I didn't know that trauma-informed yoga was a field, which is still relatively young, right? And I'm sure it will evolve and change, but it really just came from this intuitive place. So we've obviously learned a lot and grown up a lot over the last 5.5 years. What it looks like now is we take yoga teachers who have at least their 200-hour training, which for those of us in the yoga world, that's like your baseline training. And then we offer those individuals 17 hours of trauma-informed training. Yeah, which is like, I'm so proud of our training, right? And in that training, we're helping teachers understand what is the experience of trauma, how it impacts an individual. And then given that, how do you adjust your style of teaching to best meet our population where they're at? It's funny, and some yogis or yoga teachers get offended when we say this, but yoga is not always easy. And I'm not talking about like physically, like, can you touch your toes easy? I'm talking about like, yoga is not always comfortable. And
right. People don't like that. I thought that was sort of understood.
Well, because you've probably had the experience, right? But like, I've had the experience of, right, I'm anxious, right? I run on the anxious side of it.
Me too. 100%.
Which is great. And it keeps me going very fast. And then other days it takes me out. But, I've had the experience of, it can be an average Tuesday, but I'm anxious and I go to yoga and I'm asked to notice myself and sit with myself. And I would rather crawl out of my skin. Like, no, I don't want to breathe and I don't want to move slowly. And I just like, please get me out of here kind of feel. Right. And I don't think there are many people who haven't had that experience or haven't been like connected to that experience. And so they've only ever experienced yoga as like an ooey gooey delicious thing. So I think people can find that offensive, or like they take it as me saying like yoga is not helpful. And that's not what I'm saying. Like an experience, I really do believe this, right? Like an experience can be uncomfortable without being harmful, right?
Oh, I think it can go even more than that. I'll often say to people, like, where is the opportunity in the discomfort?
Exactly. Which is, and again, there's a fine line when we're talking about these issues, right? Like there's a difference between pain, this is hurting me. I'm talking physical body, or in a life situation where it's like, get yourself out of there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Safety. Well-being.
Yeah, safety. Versus this is uncomfortable. I'm safe in this moment. I'm going to sit through this, right? That's very different.
Very different. Yes.
So it's not like, martyr yourself, sit through that, abusive relationship. No. And yoga can be triggering, right? There's so many different things going on in the yoga room. So we are practicing a unique style of yoga that's trauma informed. So we've developed our own approach, our own methodology. There's many different ways to be trauma informed, and different people, different organizations have different approaches. So again, I can't claim that we have the right way or the best way. I think we have a great way that works for our population.
Yeah.
So we take our teachers through that and helping them understand, again, just to give you some high level like insights, right? So our yoga teachers teach from their own mats, right? So in your average yoga class, a teacher is kind of walking around the room, which for individuals who have experienced trauma, they're often hypervigilant.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't want somebody potentially coming around behind them when they're in downward dog. There's a real safety of personal space.
And even just like tracking your teacher through the room, right, is exhausting. We don't offer any hands-on adjustments. Touch, incredibly healing when appropriate, but given the experience of many of our students, we just don't go there.
So this is what you're teaching in the 17 hours. You're teaching them how to really show up in this unique way.
In this unique way, and how to be invitational in their language, how to, many of our students have never practiced yoga before. Yoga is specifically not for them, right?
Right. They think it's for like
skinny.
Who do they think it's for? Yeah. Skinny white women in yoga pants who are wealthy.
Yes, exactly. Which they're not wrong. You look at social media and it's like a skinny white woman in a bikini on the beach doing yoga, right? Like that's what right. The social media would have us believe. And so a big part of our work is helping our students understand yoga is for you, and yoga can be done from a yoga mat. It can be done from a chair. You can sit on the side of your bed and do yoga. You never need to touch your toes. You definitely don't need to stand on your head. And so there's a bit of an education around what yoga is. We take our teachers through that, obviously much more in depth than that. And then our teachers go directly into shelters, rape crisis centers to offer yoga on a weekly basis. Both clients who are, maybe they're living in a shelter, maybe they're receiving services at a walk-in center. That's about 50% of our classes. And then the other 50% of our classes are held for staff members at these facilities.
That's awesome. I didn't actually know that. I mean, I'd heard about your work before, but as somebody who's worked with, in the service end of trauma, like yoga has helped me immeasurably through many, many of my own personal crises and professional challenges. And I love that you're supporting the supporters.
Yeah. And it took us, I don't know exactly, but maybe a year in, we realized like, oh, wow, like these individuals need yoga too, because we're all stressed out and we're all overworked and most of us are underpaid, right? But like these staff members aren't, like creating widgets. Their daily job is holding space for, this, right? Their daily job is holding space for and processing other individuals' trauma.
Which is secondary trauma. You take some of that on. Yeah, you definitely take that on.
Vicarious trauma. The rates of burnout in this field, I don't have this statistic, but I know from just like emailing facilities and being like, well, Stephanie's no longer here, and the number of times I get that email, because the burnout rate is really high. So we offer yoga to the staff members, one, because they're humans and they deserve to have access to these practices. And then also, right, in full transparency, they're also our best recruiters, right? I walk into a facility and this is a podcast, so people can't see me, but I'm a skinny white woman, right? And I'm the yoga lady. And so I walk in and I'm like, come to yoga. And they're like, who is she?
What are you talking about? You don't know anything about my life.
Exactly.
Right.
Versus if it's their case manager who they've been seeing over the last couple of weeks, months, who they have a relationship with. And their case manager is able to say, hey, I know yoga might seem scary to you. I went on Tuesday. This is what it was like. This is how I felt during yoga. I think you might want to give it a try. Classes on Thursday. You were willing to check it out? Much different.
Much different. And you're creating sustainability.
Yes.
You're creating this system, this organism where any level of participation has the opportunity to be restored and to heal and to keep going. It's amazing. Through building this, like while this has all been coming together and you've created I'm imagining you have a board of directors and you've had to do funds development and all of the pieces that it takes to really have a nonprofit reach a 5-year anniversary, which by the way is a big deal. It's a milestone. A lot don't ever make it that far. I'm always curious about this, like 2 questions. One, were you also working? Was this your primary focus, or were you also trying to hold down another job? Because I think people always wonder, do I have to quit one thing to start the other? Can I, and I don't remember what 2 is, so we'll start with 1.
So when I started, I had a full-time job. So
that's what I was wondering.
I started Exhale to Inhale my senior year of college. I think I graduated in May and we launched our first classes June of 2013. And so I graduated with, this new nonprofit and a job secured in management consulting because I went to a really good school. So I need to get the fancy job that's going to pay me all the money, right? Like, right. That I was kind of living that story, which honestly, no regrets, because that job did make me some money that I then had the ability to take a risk on the organization. And it also taught me a lot about leadership, business, analytical skills. So for the first 2.5 I was working crazy hours in consulting. And then, I guess I just didn't sleep. And then doing access of kind of like nights and weekends. And again, it was insanity, but the beauty or the blessing in that is it again forced me to really lean into other people. And again, like out of pure necessity, pull people in really close and say like, hey, I need you to help me run this. The fact that people did that is still, I can't really get over. 2 of our founding board members, Amy Tobin and Kate Mitchell, like for the, first bit, really just like co-led the organization. I was there, but, I was otherwise engaged. And and then about 2.5 years in, I had my second quarter life crisis. The good things always come out of them, though, I'll definitely say that about my crises. And I realized that the money that I was making in consulting wasn't worth it. And although I was learning a lot and enjoyed it in many ways, it was not my magic. And so then decided to bet on myself and bet on the organization and came back full time. So I think it's, and again, not to go too far down a rabbit hole, but I have an incredible amount of privilege that was an option, right? Not only was I able to secure a well-paying job that then I could set aside some money so that okay, for X amount, I don't need to get paid. I can just do this, right? But I also have a safety net of I have a family that I knew would never let me go without a meal or go without housing. And I know that that's not the reality of everyone's situation. And so again, when we talk about how do you choose to use your impact, I think it's similarly of I have privilege. I don't need to apologize for that, but I should use it in a way that is good,
Mm-hmm.
So I feel lucky that I had the safety net. Part of it was my own work, and part of it was definitely not, that allowed me to do the work I've been doing.
I really actually so appreciate that you even touch on privilege, especially honestly, a 29-year-old who is even exploring those questions at that level of depth. It gives me hope. There's so much pushback still around that edgy topic. And I've had a beautiful privilege of giving a talk, facilitating a workshop that I created here where I live a couple times now around how to raise culturally competent kids. And I live in a really privileged community for the most part. However, I worked in the public schools for a decade, and my husband has been a high school teacher here in Boulder for 15 years. And if you work in the schools, you see the true cross section that while predominantly our community is wealthy, there are lots of different marginalized communities hiding out, if you will, and it has just been, it's edgy. It's still edgy to go into a room of mostly, so far the rooms that I've done this in have been mostly my peer group of a privileged parent base, and have this conversation around, okay, but this is actually our position, and therefore what? How do we really want to raise our kids? How do we want them to be able to function in a diverse world? How do we want them to have empathy and understanding? How do we want them to be able to come together in community? And so for me, it's really heartwarming. I know you said not to go down the rabbit hole, but you can't have this conversation about the work you're doing with high integrity without us just really looking at what we, each of us, brings to the work we do. And we always bring our own story and circumstance to the work that we do.
Yeah. And there, and I think it's similarly to that conversation about, or what we're talking about, not knowing, right? Not always having the answers. I think that's something I've realized, when we talk about elements of privilege, there's ways in which I'm privileged and ways in which I'm not privileged. And sometimes you don't even know what those ways are until you meet someone else who's not privileged in the same way, or who is privileged in a way you're not. And so I think it's, it's about being awake and aware and leaning into some of those sticky conversations that are
being willing to learn, being willing to grow, being willing to be oh man, actually, there was a woman from Israel who attended one of these workshops, and she was wonderful. And afterwards, she talked to me. She's like, it's interesting though, most of the scenarios you give still presume that it's the dominant culture responding to the scenarios. So then I flipped it around. I was like, oh yeah, let me really consider that. What would it look like if you were looking at this from a different lens? Always looking at it from a different lens. We can always keep learning and peeling back the layers. I think that the danger lies in, back to courage, that we don't wait till we have everything figured out in order to move forward, make a contribution, ask the questions, that we can sit with a degree of discomfort around not knowing, or perhaps looking a fool, in order to get closer to the impact we want to have. Because you can't really get there without that risk.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's about having the right intentions and then acknowledging, this is coming up a lot lately, of like the difference between an intention versus impact.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And
it's interesting.
Everywhere, right? And again, people are talking, it's such a good conversation of like, I think sometimes we hide behind our intentions of like, no, but my intentions were good. And like, okay, yeah, but you like ended up really hurting someone, or you said something that was actually quite offensive. So I think like, yes, having good intentions and then being able to be like, oof, ouch, like, I'm sorry.
I messed up. Right. How do I clean this up?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah. Okay. So I really want to know I want to know if this is going beyond New York City. I want to know what the big vision or impact your desire is for this work. Where would you love to see this go?
And I reserve the right to have it shift and change, but
right now, today, in November of 2018, what's the dream? Yeah. What's the dream for this beautiful yoga-informed support for those who've been victims of sexual violence and domestic violence?
I think a couple things. I think one, just like really bringing the element of hope and healing to this issue, right? I think being engaged in the conversations around domestic violence and sexual assault, but also like, and there's a way to like put the pieces back together, right? And there's really bringing that through line of an individual, because I think sometimes like we even don't use the word victims, we use the word survivors.
Yeah, it's great. I think I said victims.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's all good. It's all
well,
good.
It's a hard, it's interesting I love that you called me out on that actually, because I'm like super, super aware of sort of victim mindset. Yeah. And there's a few things where I just like, no, it's just never okay. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Where I get angry, like it's like the mama bear in me where I'm like, nobody should be harmed in that way. It's always not okay. And then it's like, almost like I have to watch myself because there's like an acceptance of that being a victim stance, but it's not an empowering stance. So I just, you know what I mean? But it's coming from a real binary thought of right and wrong.
Yes, totally. No.
So I love that you flip that and have it be another place to stand.
And I think really like when we talk about survivors, like it's about trusting in these, like the individual's inherent resilience.
Yes.
That survivors aren't people that need to be, like they need to be supported, but they're not like needing to be saved, right? So like,
absolutely.
I'm like holier than thou, right? Like, let me come off my pedestal and save you. Like, it's not about that. It's like, we really come from the perspective of like, hey, yoga's been helpful for me. Maybe it will be helpful for you. You want to give it a try, right? It's like one person to another person. So kind of trying to
it's humanizing.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, like dismantling the power structure, which exists. I mean, it's actually pretty rampant in the yoga world, right? There's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think participating in the dialogue in that way. I also want yoga to be seen as valid and legitimate. So just the same way that when an individual walks into a shelter and, they go through intake and it's kind of what services does this individual need? Like yoga is just, it's a box that you check. It's not some like supplementary fluffy thing. It's like,
it's a valid resource for healing.
You're going to see your therapist on Tuesday and you're going to see the yoga teacher on Friday. Like it's just, it's that way. And then finally, I mean, there's so many, but like the three I would kind of distill it to is, these, and then the final one is continuing to work towards, and this is really kind of my 2019 and beyond focus, is making sure that exhale to inhale is sustainable beyond me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really believe that the true sign of leadership is the ability to have whatever you've created live beyond you. Not to say I'm going anywhere, but like there should be a day in the next few years, but like I could walk away from exhale to inhale and it has a life of its own, because I think it would be heartbreaking to me of, at some point, whatever, life takes a turn and I'm no longer daily involved and everything dismantles. So I'm really invested in making sure that this organization has life beyond me, because I would love to be out of a job one day and there's, no more survivors to serve, but that's not the reality of the world we're living in. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make sure that this is sustainable.
I really, this idea that a true sign of leadership is having what you created live beyond you. It's quite profound. And first we have to realize that we are leaders and that, again, back to the impact that we can make and that we are currently making. And then taking it beyond, how can you have that impact be not just at your hand? And it's making me think I'm all excited right now because I inadvertently have had a few amazing yogis on here on the show who are taking yoga to a place of healing and activism out of this notion that it is self-serving only, that it's just an internal game. Because really, at its core, yoga it's cheap, it's affordable. It can be done anywhere, just with your body. You don't need tools. You don't need, you know what I mean? And so there's this way in which it can be such a beautiful, universal supporting modality. So I'm thinking also of Dr. Melody Moore, who created the Embody Love movement, who was on the show a few weeks ago, and just that she shared similarly to you. And it's such a generous thought that how Embody Love movement just took off and flourished when she allowed others to really support it beyond her, that she herself couldn't take it to the next fullest level. She's still highly involved, but to the biggest expression of its being, it actually was a collective effort.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're speaking to a similar notion. Like, this is something that is, yes, I started it. I birthed this idea and I've nurtured it along and I'm not going anywhere. And I want it to be institutionalized as a way for supporting healing on the planet, basically.
It's just that. Yep.
Just that small, big vision.
No big deal.
No big deal. Don't worry. When you turn 30,
Exactly.
But it's exciting to see the ways that people step into leading with what they know and what they love. I mean, you basically took how yoga helped you and thought, where else could this be of service?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where else could this be of service? So one more question that I really love to explore, and not to keep talking about your age, because honestly, you've done a ton, more than many have done in a lifetime, to contribute and to really tap into your own inherent gifts and talents. But I do wonder what leadership challenges you faced along the way. I think that everyone I've talked to who has been up to something big and really deciding, like you said, choosing to lead, opting into leadership, has faced some obstacles, whether it's been financial or people who don't believe in the vision or men who won't give them funding or internal, that they don't think they are the one to lead this thing. I just love to make it such that people see those who are now crushing it also have faced challenges along the way.
Oh man, I don't think I figured it out. Look, I think, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but obviously, I would say for me, a lot of my challenges have always been internal, like impostor syndrome and not, can I do this? Am I doing enough? That, like, those kind of struggles that I think we often have. So definitely those. And I've gotten better and better at kind of talking myself through those of like, actually you can, and the track record shows that like you're capable.
Right.
So you'll probably be able to do this again. So I've definitely, worked on that. I don't know one person that's kind of like quelled all of those voices. So I'm sure that will be a lifelong journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think I'm still finding my way as a leader, I would say. I think that like there's definitely some touchstones, like I talked about, really wanting to be, a collective leader in terms of, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? But I'm still refining how I want to lead. It's funny, like, I think you're asking more about leadership, but I think one thing that is most top of mind for me these last few weeks is like management. Like management for me is actually harder. I think leadership in terms of like inspiring people and talking.
But management is a part of leadership. It really is for most people. It's one that they don't talk about as much, but
yeah. And I think for me, what I'm finding hard in that is like, because I either want to play like, okay, you're doing a great job and everything's fine, and just kind of like give everyone a star, or like be hard on people the way I'm hard on me, and like finding the middle. I think good managers walk that middle path.
Yes.
And I think the blessing of all of this stuff I've really realized in the last couple of years is like it's all the same stuff, right? Like what I work with when I'm sitting in therapy in my own life is also what shows up when we're talking about leadership, right? Like, because the way that I'm talking to me is probably the way I'm talking to you. It's probably, so it's right. like that's why
the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah, because I'm the same person, right? And all the things, and it's just putting on different hats. And so that's why, really no moment is wasted, right? It's like me meditating in the morning and me journaling in the morning, which is like my self-care non-negotiable, is not like, that's not 30 minutes where I'm quote unquote not working. That's actually setting me up for my day to be a leader, right? Because like I need to take care of myself so that I can then, turn a little more external. So
yeah, it's huge.
It's very long-winded, and I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, those are good. Your challenges are more internal, but over time, there's evidence to help quell the noise a little bit, which I think is part of the journey. So if you could offer one piece of advice, one piece of wisdom to other women or men who might be listening, who want to serve but may not know how to begin, what would you say?
Get quiet. Feel into what feels like unsettled or what you're kind of like coming up against. And that's the area in which you're probably being drawn to serve, right? Like what is kind of unsettling you. And then like you and I talked about, I think it's then begin, right? And maybe you're sitting there and you're like really like sad about all the homeless people that you see as you walk to work in the morning, right? Great. Go Google the local soup kitchen and just go. Like it doesn't need to, and it may end up being something bigger and more involved than that, but just start, start. Somewhere.
So be curious. No, get quiet, be curious, and begin.
Yep.
Quiet, curious, and begin. Great. Okay. So just lastly, I want to make sure that people can find out about Exhale to Inhale, how they can participate, how they can make a contribution. You're a nonprofit. You're always fundraising, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How they can find out more about this work if they're like, I know somebody who would tap into this beautifully, just how they can support you.
Yeah. So probably the best place that has all of the information is our website, and it's exhaletoinhale.org. 2 is spelled out TO, exhaletoinhale.org. And then you can find me on probably Instagram is the best place to find me. And it's Zoe LePage NYC. We are always looking for people to get involved, whether that's, to take our training, to volunteer, teach with us, to donate. So check us out and be in touch.
Wonderful. Zoe, thank you so much for what your light and what you're bringing to the world and your courage to keep going. We really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Naked Conversations. Yay! It really means the world to me every time you show up. And if you want to know more about how to work with me personally and my coaching, you can check that out over at sagebhobbs.com. You can also get some great free resources over there about how to make powerful requests and many blog posts full of resources for living a naked life, as well as grab a copy of my book, Naked Communication: Courageously Create the Relationships You Really Want. Thanks again. See you next time.